The massive crystal dome stretched across the void of space, floating like a giant jewel between the stars. Inside, beings from 47 different worlds sat in careful circles, each group keeping to their own kind. The air buzzed with 100 different languages, all translated instantly by the station's ancient systems. Ambassador Jin Minjun walked through the main entrance with his small team behind him. His black suit looked simple next to the flowing robes and shining armor worn by other delegates. The humans moved quietly, drawing glances but no real attention. "Look at them," whispered Counselor Vextar, his blue skin shimmering as he leaned toward his companion. The Zephyrian delegate laughed, a sound like wind through broken glass. "I heard their planet still uses chemical rockets. How primitive." Jin heard the words but kept walking. His team followed his lead, saying nothing. Dr. Sarah Kim, the science advisor, glanced at the towering Krillian warriors with their plasma weapons. Captain Lee Donghyun, their military liaison, studied the room with calm eyes. The council president, an ancient being called the Mediator, raised one of her 6 arms. The hall fell silent. Her voice reached every corner without technology, carried by abilities older than most civilizations. "Today we welcome Earth to its first full council session," she announced. "For 6 months, humanity has been observers. Now, they join us as equals." More whispers filled the air. The word equals brought snorts from several delegations. Counselor Thrak Khan of the Hegemony stood up. His red skin gleamed like polished metal. "Mediator, with respect, how can a species that barely reached their own moon century ago be our equals? Their technology is thousands of years behind ours. Their planet is a backwater dirt farm," added the Zephyrian. "What could they possibly contribute?" The Mediator's dark eyes turned to Jin. "Ambassador Jin, your people requested to join our defense alliance. The Council needs to understand what Earth brings to our shared protection. Please, tell us of your military capabilities." Jin stood slowly. The hall grew quiet, every eye fixed on the small human figure. He looked around the room, meeting gazes that ranged from curious to dismissive to hostile. "Honored Mediator, respected counselors," Jin began, his voice carrying clearly without raising its tone. "Earth appreciates this opportunity to serve alongside such distinguished civilizations." He paused, looking at the faces around him. Some showed impatience. Others seemed ready to laugh. "However," Jin continued, "my people have a saying, actions speak louder than words. We prefer to show rather than tell." Counselor Vextar rolled his eyes. "More delay tactics. What exactly are you proposing to show us? Your chemical rockets?" Jin smiled slightly. "A demonstration would answer your questions better than any speech I could give." The hegemony delegate slammed his fist on his chair's armrest. "This is ridiculous. We're supposed to trust our safety to a species that won't even describe their military?" "Perhaps," suggested the Zephyrian with obvious mockery. "They're embarrassed by their primitive weapons." "Room." Other delegates began talking among themselves. Some laughed openly. The Krillian admiral, a massive figure covered in battle scars, shook his head in disgust. Jin waited for the noise to die down. When it didn't, he simply stood quietly until his silence drew attention. One by one, voices faded until the hall was still again. "Mediator," Jin said calmly. "Earth requests access to a standard testing ground. We understand that new members traditionally demonstrate their capabilities before full inclusion in defense planning." The Mediator considered this. Around the room, delegates exchanged glances. Several nodded eagerly, seeing a chance to watch the humans embarrass themselves. "The testing grounds at Valdris Prime are available," she announced. 3 standard days from now. Will this suit your needs?" "Perfect," Jin replied. "We'll need only basic sensor coverage and safety perimeters." "What about targets?" asked Admiral Korvac of the Krillians. How many battle platforms will you need to properly display your fleet's power? Jin tilted his head slightly. One small asteroid should be enough. The hall erupted in laughter. Even some of the more polite delegates couldn't hide their amusement. The Zephyrian actually stood up, holding his sides. One asteroid? Korvac boomed. My personal fighter could vaporize an asteroid. What kind of demonstration is that? The kind that answers your questions. Jin replied simply. Dr. Kim leaned forward slightly, catching Jin's eye. He gave her an almost invisible nod. She relaxed back into her chair. The mediator raised her arms for silence again. Very well. In 3 days, we will witness Earth's military demonstration. I trust all interested parties will attend? Nearly every delegation indicated they would be there. Some wanted to see what humans could actually do. Most wanted to watch them fail spectacularly. As the formal session ended, delegates began filing out in their various groups. The humans remained seated until the room mostly emptied. Confident, aren't you? The voice belonged to Counselor Zara Eth of the Sylvan Collective, one of the few species that hadn't mocked them. Her plant-like features showed genuine curiosity rather than amusement. Jin stood and bowed slightly. Confidence is earned through action, Counselor. We simply prefer not to make promises we can't keep. And can you keep this one? She asked quietly. Jin's expression never changed, but something in his eyes made her step back slightly. Counselor, he said softly. Earth has been watching the galaxy for a very long time. We know exactly what we can do. She studied his face for a moment longer, then nodded slowly and walked away. Captain Lee moved closer to Jin as they prepared to leave. Sir, are you sure about this approach? They're going to expect a show. Captain, Jin replied, gathering his simple black folder. They'll get exactly what they need to see. Nothing more, nothing less. Dr. Kim joined them as they walked toward the exit. The asteroid size they're setting up will be about standard, roughly 2 kilometers across, reinforced metallic core. Perfect, Jin said. Have Admiral Park bring the soul. Just the soul? Lee asked. Sir, that's barely a scout ship by their standards. Jin stopped walking and turned to face his team. Around them, the crystal dome continued its slow rotation among the stars. The soul will be quite sufficient, he said quietly. Trust me. As they left the council chambers, none of the humans noticed the small figure following at a distance. Counselor Zara Eth watched them board their simple transport with growing unease. Something about the human ambassador bothered her. It wasn't what he had said, but what he hadn't said. In her centuries of diplomatic experience, she had learned to read between the words. And Jin Minjun's words had very large spaces between them. 3 days later, she would understand why. The testing grounds around Valdris Prime's third moon buzzed with activity. Dozens of ships from different species formed a safe viewing perimeter around the designated combat zone. The ancient asteroid belt here had been used for military demonstrations for over 1,000 years. Admiral Park So-young sat in the command chair of the Soul, watching the readings on her simple displays. Through the main screen, she could see the Krillian battle group taking position for their demonstration. 3 massive warships, each one the size of a small city, moved into formation with practiced precision. Impressive sight, commented Commander Chen Wei from the navigation station. Their lead destroyer masses about 50 times what we do. End quote. Park nodded without taking her eyes off the screen. Size isn't everything, Commander. On the observation platform built into Valdris Prime's largest moon, representatives from nearly every council species gathered to watch. Jin stood beside the mediator, his hands clasped behind his back. The viewing area hummed with excited conversation and barely contained laughter. The Krillian demonstration will begin in 5 minutes, announced the test coordinator through the station's communication system. All vessels maintain safe distance. Admiral Korvac's voice boomed across the communication channels. Honored observers, Today you witness the might of the Krillian Imperial Fleet. These are the weapons that have kept the hegemony forces at bay for 3 centuries. His flagship, the Devastation, moved forward. The ship bristled with weapon ports and energy projectors. Crystalline armor plating caught the light from Valdris Prime, making the vessel look like a moving mountain of deadly beauty. Target designated, the coordinator announced. Standard reinforced asteroid. 2.4 kilometers diameter. Metallic core. Enhanced with defensive plating. The asteroid hung in space like a small metal moon. Its surface gleamed with the same armor materials used on heavy battleships. Weapons from a dozen species had tested against similar targets over the years. Krillian Fleet, you are cleared to engage. What followed was a display of raw power that left many observers speechless. The 3 Krillian ships opened fire together. Plasma beams thicker than city blocks lanced out, striking the asteroid in coordinated patterns. Energy shields flared around each ship as they channeled enormous amounts of power into their weapons. The asteroid began to crack. Pieces of armor plating the size of buildings broke away and tumbled into space. The Krillians adjusted their fire pattern, concentrating their beams on specific points. Within minutes, the entire 2-kilometer rock had been reduced to glowing fragments. Cheers went up from several delegations. Even species that disliked the Krillians had to admit the display was impressive. Outstanding work, the mediator announced. The Krillian fleet maintains its reputation for excellence. Admiral Korvac's laughter echoed through the communication system. That, honored delegates, is how real warriors handle threats to galactic peace. His ships moved back to the observation perimeter with slow dignity. All eyes turned to the small human vessel that had been waiting quietly in the staging area. Earth Fleet, please take position for your demonstration, the coordinator announced. The Soul moved forward alone. Compared to the Krillian battleships, it looked like a toy. Several delegates on the observation platform pointed and whispered. "Where's the rest of their fleet?" asked Counselor Vextar. "Maybe that is their entire fleet," the Zephyrian delegate replied, causing another wave of laughter. A new asteroid was moved into position, identical to the one the Krillians had destroyed. The Soul approached it slowly, making no aggressive moves. No weapons extended from its hull. No energy signatures showed weapon charging. "Earth vessel, are you experiencing technical difficulties?" the coordinator asked. Park's calm voice came through clearly. "No difficulties. We're in position. Please indicate when you're ready to begin your demonstration." "We're ready now." The observers waited and waited. The Soul hung motionless in space near the asteroid. Nothing happened. "Admiral Park," Jin's voice came through the command channel. "The Council is waiting for your demonstration." "Demonstration complete, Ambassador," Park replied simply. Silence filled the communication channels. On the observation platform, delegates looked at each other in confusion. "Complete?" the mediator asked. "Admiral, the target asteroid remains intact." "No," Park said. "It doesn't." Every sensor in the area focused on the asteroid. It hung in space exactly where it had been placed, showing no damage whatsoever. "Admiral," Counselor Thrakon's voice carried obvious irritation. "We can all see the asteroid. It's completely undamaged." "Please check your quantum resonance scanners," Park suggested calmly. The test coordinator's voice came back after a moment, puzzled and uncertain. That's impossible." "What's impossible?" demanded Admiral Korvac. "The asteroid. It's not there." "What do you mean it's not there?" the Zephyrian delegate snapped. "We can see it. Visual confirmation shows a solid object," the coordinator explained, his voice growing more confused. "But quantum scanning shows nothing. Empty space." Dr. Kim's voice came through the Soul's communication system, speaking to the observers. "You're seeing an echo. The asteroid was removed from this dimensional frame approximately 30 seconds ago. What you're looking at is the light that was reflecting off it before removal." Stunned silence filled the communication channels. Removed to where? The mediator asked quietly. Elsewhere, Park answered. The location isn't important. Admiral Korvac's angry voice cut through the silence. This is some kind of trick. Hidden weapons, holographic deception. Admiral, Park said patiently, please scan the space where the asteroid was positioned. More silence as sensors focused on the target area. Then the coordinator's voice returned, barely above a whisper. There's nothing there. No debris. No energy residue. No quantum disturbance. The space is completely empty, as if nothing had ever been there. Counselor Zara Eth leaned forward on the observation platform. Admiral Park, how did you accomplish this? The same way you might move a chair from one room to another, Park replied. We simply moved it to a different room. No. But asteroids don't just move, Vextar stammered. Everything moves if you know how to ask it politely, Park said. The soul began turning away from the test area. If there are no further questions, we'll return to the staging area. End quote. Known. 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 Wait, the mediator called. Admiral, this demonstration raises many questions. I'm sure it does, Park acknowledged. Perhaps Ambassador Jin can address those back at the council chambers. Jin's voice carried clearly to all listeners. We'll be happy to discuss the demonstration at your convenience, mediator, though I should mention that what you've seen today represents a very basic application of our capabilities. On the observation platform, delegates stared at each other in growing unease. The Krillians had destroyed an asteroid with overwhelming firepower and impressive coordination. The humans had made one disappear without any visible effort at all. As the Soul rejoined the observation fleet, Admiral Korvac's voice came through the communication system one more time. Humans, he said quietly. I think we need to talk. Park's reply was equally quiet. Yes, Admiral. I think we do. In the depths of space, where the asteroid had been. Sensors continued to report empty space, where moments before a 2-kilometer rock had hung among the stars. No one could explain where it had gone. No one except the quiet crew of the Soul, who were already thinking about what they would need to demonstrate next. The emergency alarms began screaming before anyone could fully process what had happened to the asteroid. Every sensor array around Valdris Prime lit up with incoming contacts. Multiple ships approaching from the galactic rim. The coordinator's voice was tight with fear. Configuration unknown, but energy signatures matched Devourer technology. On the observation platform, delegates froze. The word Devourer cut through every conversation like a blade. These were the machines that had terrorized the galaxy's edge for over 1,000 years. Ancient, merciless, and nearly impossible to stop. How many contacts? Admiral Korvac demanded, his earlier confusion about the human demonstration forgotten. Scanning. 12 ships. No, wait. 15. They're still coming through whatever portal they're using. Through the viewing screens, dark shapes began appearing against the star field. The Devourer ships looked like someone had taken nightmares and given them metal form. Twisted spikes and geometric patterns covered hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. All civilian vessels withdraw immediately, the mediator commanded. Military ships prepare for combat. The 3 Krillian battleships turned toward the approaching threat, their weapons already charging. 2 hegemony cruisers that had been observing the demonstration moved to flank positions. A Zephyrian fast attack squadron spread out to cover escape routes. Deaver ships are targeting the observation platform, the coordinator reported, his voice cracking. All council delegates must evacuate immediately. Panic spread through the observation area as beings from dozens of species rushed toward escape pods and emergency transports. The mediator remained at her position, coordinating the evacuation with practiced calm. Soul, withdraw to safe distance. Admiral Korvac ordered over the communication system. This is not your fight. Park's voice came back steady and unchanged. Admiral, We appreciate the concern, but will remain on station. Are you insane? That's a Devourer attack squadron. They'll tear your ship apart. On the observation platform, Jin watched the approaching enemy vessels with no expression of fear or concern. Dr. Kim stood beside him, also calm, despite the chaos around them. Ambassador, the mediator said, as she passed them heading for an evacuation craft. Your people must leave. The Devourers show no mercy to anyone. Thank you for the warning, Jin replied politely. We'll be fine. The first exchange of fire lit up space between the defending ships and the Devourers. Plasma beams from the Krillian fleet struck Devourer hulls, causing minor damage but nothing critical. The enemy ships responded with weapons that bent space itself, creating gravity wells that tried to crush their targets. One of the hegemony cruisers took a direct hit and began breaking apart. The crew managed to evacuate before the ship collapsed into a point of twisted metal. We need reinforcements, Admiral Korvac called desperately. Send word to all nearby fleets. Nearest support is 6 hours away, came the reply. The Rim Patrol was destroyed yesterday. We're on our own. Thing's problem. End quote. Thing's problem. More Devourer ships continued appearing. The count reached 20, then 25. Each one was larger than the biggest Council warship. Sol, get out of there now, Korvac shouted as 2 Devourer vessels turned toward the small human ship. We can't protect you. Park's response was barely a whisper. But it carried to every ship in the area. Admiral? Permission to handle this situation? What? Handle what situation? The Devourer attack, Park said simply. Before anyone could respond, space around the Sol began to change. What had appeared to be empty space suddenly wasn't empty anymore. Ships began appearing as if reality was being rewritten around them. Not just a few ships, dozens of them, then hundreds. Where did they come from? Someone whispered over the communication system. The human vessels didn't look like any ships the Council species had ever seen. They moved without visible propulsion, their hulls seeming to slide through space rather than push through it. No energy signatures registered on any sensors, yet they obviously existed. Sol actual to all Devourer units. Park's voice carried across every frequency. You will cease hostilities and withdraw immediately. The Devourer response was predictable. Their ships turned as one toward the human fleet and opened fire with every weapon they possessed. Space-bending gravity weapons, plasma streams that could melt through any known armor, and energy beams that unmade matter at the molecular level. None of it reached the human ships. The attacks simply stopped. Midway between the Devourers and their targets, the weapon's effects ended, as if hitting an invisible wall. But sensors showed no barriers, no shields, no interference of any kind. Warning not acknowledged, Park observed calmly. Proceeding with removal. What happened next made the asteroid demonstration look simple. The Devourer ships began coming apart, but not from weapon fire. They separated into their component pieces, as if someone was carefully taking them apart with invisible hands. Hull plates detached and folded themselves into neat stacks. Weapon systems disconnected and arranged themselves by type. Even the twisted organic components that made Devourer technology work sorted themselves into organized groups. Are they disassembling them? Dr. Kim's voice carried a note of professional fascination. Efficiently, Park confirmed. Within minutes, 27 Devourer attack ships had been reduced to organized collections of parts floating in space. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just carefully taken apart, as if by a team of engineers with infinite patience. The silence that followed was absolute. Sol. Admiral Korvac's voice was barely audible. What just happened? Threat neutralized, Park reported. Devourer components have been cataloged and prepared for disposal or study as Council preferences dictate. How? The mediator asked. She had stopped her evacuation midway and returned to watch the impossible scene. Standard procedure, Park replied. though we did modify our approach slightly for public demonstration. Modified how? Counselor Zara Eth asked. Usually we just relocate threats to uninhabited dimensions, Dr. Kim explained. Taking them apart like this requires more precision, but provides better opportunities for study. Jin's voice cut through the stunned silence. Mediator, Council delegates, I believe this concludes our requested demonstration. Are there any further questions about Earth's defensive capabilities? On the observation platform, beings from 47 different worlds stared at the organized debris fields that had been a Devourer attack force moments before. The human fleet hung in space as calmly as if nothing had happened. Ambassador Jin, the mediator said slowly. How long has Earth possessed such technology? Long enough, Jin replied. The more important question is what happens next. What do you mean? Asked Counselor Vextar, his earlier mockery completely forgotten. Jin turned to face the assembled delegates, many of whom were just returning from evacuation attempts. The Devourers never send scouts alone, he explained calmly. When their reconnaissance forces don't return, they investigate, usually with much larger fleets. The observation platform fell silent again as the implications sank in. How much larger? Admiral Korvac asked quietly. The last time we encountered a full Devourer response fleet, Dr. Kim said. It numbered approximately 4,000 ships. 4,000? Someone whispered. When can we expect them? The mediator asked. Park's voice answered from the soul. Based on standard Devourer protocols, main force arrival in 18 hours. Jin looked around at the pale, frightened faces surrounding him. Which brings us to an important decision, he continued. Do you want us to handle this quietly, or would you prefer another demonstration? The emergency council session began within hours. Every delegate who could reach the Crystal Dome did so, along with military commanders and intelligence officials from across the galaxy. The Great Hall buzzed with fearful conversations and desperate planning. Admiral Korvac stood before a massive tactical display showing the galactic rim. Red markers indicated where Devourer forces had been spotted over the past month. The pattern was unmistakable. They're moving inward, he reported grimly. Not random raids anymore. This is organized expansion. The rim worlds are already evacuating. How long do we have? Asked the mediator. If they maintain current advancement speed, the core systems have maybe 6 months, replied the hegemony's chief strategist. Less if they decide to move faster. Worried voices filled the hall. Some delegates called for immediate military mobilization. Others suggested diplomatic contact attempts. A few recommended preparing for full retreat to the galaxy's far side. Jin sat quietly through it all, listening to the growing panic without comment. Dr. Kim took notes on a simple tablet. Captain Lee watched the tactical displays with professional interest. The Valdris engagement changes everything, Counselor Throckcon declared. The humans destroyed a Devourer squadron without taking any damage. We need to understand how. 2. All eyes turned to the human delegation. Jin stood slowly, waiting for the hall to quiet before speaking. Honored delegates, he began in the same calm tone he always used. Dr. Kim will provide the technical briefing you've requested. Dr. Kim moved to the central podium. She looked small beside the massive alien delegates, but her voice carried clearly throughout the hall. The Devourers represent a 3,000-year-old machine intelligence, she began. They operate by converting matter into more of themselves, using techniques that your species classify as highly advanced physics. We know what they are. Vextar interrupted impatiently. How did you stop them? We didn't stop them, Dr. Kim replied calmly. We relocated them. Relocated where? To a pocket dimension where they can continue their existence without threatening organic life. The hall erupted in confused voices. The Zephyrian delegate stood up angrily. Pocket dimensions are theoretical at best. No one has ever created stable, dimensional barriers. Dr. Kim nodded politely. That's correct. No one in this galaxy has developed that technology. What do you mean, this galaxy? Asked Counselor Zara quietly. Jin stood up again. Perhaps I should provide some context. He walked to the center of the hall, where holographic star charts could be displayed. With a gesture, the familiar map of their galaxy appeared above them. For the past 800 years, Jin began, Earth has been monitoring galactic civilization. We've watched your wars, your peace treaties, your technological development, and your encounters with the Devourers. Impossible, Admiral Korvac stated. We would have detected observation systems. You detected what we wanted you to detect, Jin replied gently. Our actual monitoring network operates outside normal spacetime. The star map above them changed, zooming out to show their galaxy as just one of many scattered across a vast cosmos. Earth's development followed a different path than yours, Jin continued. While you focused on faster ships and stronger weapons, we learned to manipulate fundamental forces. Space, time, dimension, reality itself. Dr. Kim stepped forward again. The ships you saw at Valdris weren't ships in the traditional sense. They're mobile reality anchors that can rewrite local physics. Rewrite physics? The mediator asked. When something threatens galactic civilization, we simply make it not be a threat anymore, Jin explained. Sometimes that means moving it elsewhere. Sometimes it means changing what it is. The Devourers are particularly challenging because they adapt to new conditions quickly. So you've fought them before? Thrakon demanded. Not fought, Jin corrected. The hall fell silent. The implications of that single word settled over the delegates like a heavy blanket. Managed how? Zara asked quietly. Every time the Devourers have posed a significant threat to galactic civilization, we've intervened, Dr. Kim explained. The Great Devourer War of 2847? We relocated their primary fleet. The Rim Devastation of 2156? We converted their World Eater machines into harmless exploration probes. The Crisis of the Burning Stars? We made the burning stop, Jin finished simply. Admiral Korvac stared at them. You're saying, all those times we thought we won through our own efforts. You did win, Jin assured him. Why? The question came from Counselor Vextar, his voice barely above a whisper. Why? Help us. What do you want in return? Jin was quiet for a long moment. Looking around the hall at faces filled with fear, confusion, and growing understanding. Earth has a saying, he finally said. With great power comes great responsibility. We developed capabilities that could reshape reality itself. That power came with the obligation to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But you never told us, Thrakon accused. You let us think we were fighting alone. Would you prefer to know you were helpless? Jin asked gently. Or that you had guardians you never knew about? The tactical display updated again, showing new red markers moving inward from the rim. The Devourer main force was accelerating its advance. They'll be here in 16 hours now, reported the duty officer. What will you do? The mediator asked Jin. What we always do, Jin replied. Ensure the threat is neutralized, with minimal disruption to galactic civilization. And if something goes wrong? Admiral Korvac asked. If your methods fail? Jin smiled slightly. Admiral, in 800 years of protecting this galaxy, we've never encountered a threat we couldn't handle. But what if this time is different? Jin walked back to his seat, then turned to address the entire hall, one final time. Admiral, respected delegates, let me be absolutely clear about something. Earth didn't join the Galactic Council to learn from you, though we do value your perspectives. We didn't join because we needed your protection or your technology. He paused, making sure every delegate was listening. We joined because we realized that protecting the galaxy from outside threats was easier than protecting individual species who didn't know they were being protected. By becoming part of your civilization, we could address problems before they became existential crises. Dr. Kim added quietly. The Devourers represent the latest in a series of threats that have tested our methods. They're more adaptive than previous challenges, but they're still operating within the same physical laws we learned to modify centuries ago. 16 hours from now, Jin concluded, the main Devourer fleet will arrive expecting to find their scouts and this entire sector ready for conversion. Instead, they'll find themselves somewhere else entirely, with no memory of why they came here or what they were looking for. And if they come back? Vextar asked. They won't, Jin said with quiet certainty. Because we're going to solve the Devourer problem permanently. Tonight. The hall fell silent again as delegates tried to process what they'd learned. Earth hadn't just demonstrated superior technology. They'd revealed themselves as the galaxy's hidden guardians, operating from the shadows for 8 centuries. One final question, the mediator said slowly. What changes now that we know? Jin smiled genuinely for the first time since the crisis began. Now you know you're not alone in the universe, and that someone is always watching out for you, whether you know it or not. 1 month later, the council chambers felt different. Delegates still gathered in their species groups, but the conversations were quieter, more thoughtful. The great crisis that everyone had feared never came. The Devourer main fleet had arrived exactly as predicted. 4,000 ships had materialized at the galactic rim, ready to begin their systematic conversion of the galaxy into more of themselves. They had lasted exactly 37 seconds in normal spacetime before vanishing completely. No battles. No destruction. No dramatic displays of power. One moment they were there, the next they weren't. Jin sat in the same simple chair he'd occupied during his first council session, listening to reports from across the galaxy. The rim worlds were already being resettled. Trade routes had reopened. Life was returning to normal faster than anyone had thought possible. The hegemony border incidents have stopped completely, reported Councillor Thrakkon. For the first time in decades, our patrol ships aren't encountering hostile activity. Same along the Zephyrian trade lanes, added his former critic. Admiral Korvac stood to address the hall. The massive Krillian looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than before. The military situation across all sectors has stabilized, he announced. Pirates, raiders, rogue AI clusters, bioweapon remnants from old wars. Everything we've been fighting for centuries is gone. Not gone. Dr. Kim corrected gently from the human section. Relocated to places where they can exist without threatening others. Where exactly? Asked Councillor Vextar. Pocket universes designed for their specific needs, she explained. The pirates have an entire galaxy of unclaimed treasures to chase. The rogue AIs have computational dimensions where they can evolve without constraints. The bioweapons have sterile worlds where they can adapt and grow safely. You gave them their own realities? Zaraeth asked in amazement. Jin nodded. Destruction is wasteful. Most threats can be managed by giving them what they actually want, in a space where they can't harm others. The mediator raised one of her 6 arms. Ambassador Jin, the Council has debated long about what your revelations mean for our future. We have questions. Of course, Jin replied. Please ask whatever concerns you. Will Earth now take leadership of galactic civilization? Thrakkon asked bluntly. No, Jin answered immediately. Earth has no interest in ruling anything. But you have the power to control everything, Vextar pointed out. Power unused is often more effective than power displayed, Jin replied. You've governed yourselves for thousands of years. Why would we change that? Admiral Korvac leaned forward. Because you could solve every problem we have. End every conflict. Make every decision. Admiral, Jin said patiently, would you want someone else making all your decisions for you? Even if they were always right? The Krillian considered this. No, he admitted. But the temptation to use such power is exactly why we don't use it unless absolutely necessary, Dr. Kim finished. Earth learned long ago that making decisions for others, even good decisions, ultimately weakens everyone involved. Counselor Zaraeth spoke up. But surely there are times when intervention would prevent suffering? There are, Jin agreed. And we do intervene. But we try to do it in ways that preserve your ability to choose your own paths. Give us an example, the mediator requested. Dr. Kim stood up. 3 years ago, the Centauri colonies were developing biological weapons that would have created a plague capable of destroying all silicon-based life. We modified their research so the weapons became medical treatments instead. You changed their weapons into medicine? Thrakon asked. Their research was brilliant, Dr. Kim explained. They just needed a slight adjustment in perspective to realize they were creating cures rather than weapons. The researchers thought it was their own breakthrough, Jin added. Which it was. We just helped them see what they were really accomplishing. Admiral Korvac shook his head slowly. How many other times have you adjusted things? Known. Does it matter? Jin asked gently. You've made your own choices, fought your own battles, built your own civilizations. Whether we occasionally ensured favorable conditions doesn't change that those accomplishments are yours. The hall was quiet as delegates considered this. Finally, the mediator spoke again. What do you want from us now? How should we relate to Earth, knowing what we know? Jin stood up and walked to the center of the hall, where he'd revealed Earth's capabilities weeks before. But now his expression was warmer, more open. We want exactly what we've always wanted, he said. To watch you grow, to learn from your different perspectives, and to ensure you have the safety and freedom to become whatever you choose to become. You're not going to withdraw? Asked Vextar nervously. Never, Jin assured him. Earth is part of galactic civilization now. Officially, rather than secretly. We have much to learn from all of you. What could you possibly learn from us? Zaraeth asked. Your technology makes ours look primitive. Dr. Kim rejoined the conversation. Technology isn't everything. Each of your species has developed unique approaches to art, philosophy, social organization, even humor. Earth has been alone in the universe for millennia. You've given us the gift of community. And why? 40. Besides, Jin added with a slight smile, managing reality is easy. Understanding people is much more challenging. Captain Lee stood up from his position at the back of the human delegation. If I may, honored delegates? The mediator nodded. Earth's military doctrine has always focused on protection through overwhelming preparedness, Lee explained. We became powerful enough to handle any conceivable threat, so we'd never have to use that power. Rebier. Quote. But now you've revealed it, Admiral Korvac pointed out. Because the threats were escalating beyond what we could handle quietly, Lee replied. The Devourers were adapting to our subtle interventions. We needed to address them directly. And others might make the same adaptations, Jin continued. There will always be new challenges, new threats, new problems to solve. The difference is that now we can face them together. Together how? Asked Thrakon. Jin gestured around the hall. Every species here has strengths that Earth lacks. Your military traditions, your diplomatic experience, your cultural wisdom. We can handle the physics of problems. You understand the people those problems affect. Dr. Kim pulled up a holographic display showing current galactic trade routes and communication networks. For example, Earth can ensure safe passage for ships and messages. But we have no idea what should be traded or what messages should be sent. Those are decisions you make. You're offering partnership, the mediator observed. True partnership, despite the power differential. We're acknowledging what was always true, Jin corrected. Earth may have greater technological capability, but civilizations aren't built by technology alone. They're built by the choices people make every day. Admiral Korvac stood up slowly. Ambassador Jin, on behalf of the Krillian Imperial Fleet, I offer our services as security advisors to your operations. If you're going to be intervening directly now, you'll need people who understand military psychology and tactics. We would be honored to accept, Jin replied with a formal bow. One by one, other delegates began offering their species' expertise. The Hegemony's Diplomatic Corps, the Zephyrian Communication Networks, the Sylvan Collective's Environmental Management. Each contribution adding something Earth couldn't provide alone. Then it's settled, the mediator announced. Earth remains a member of the Galactic Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. But we acknowledge the special protective role they've assumed and pledge our support in carrying out that responsibility. As the formal session ended, delegates began clustering in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. The fear was gone, replaced by curiosity and growing excitement. Counselor Zaraeth approached the human delegation as they prepared to leave. Ambassador, she said quietly, may I ask you something personal? Of course, Jin replied. Are you ever afraid that you might make the wrong choice? With such power comes such consequences. Jin was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars visible through the crystal dome. Every day, he admitted. Which is why we need all of you. Power without wisdom is dangerous. And wisdom comes from many voices, many perspectives, many experiences, even when those voices disagree with you? Especially then. Jin smiled. Earth has been making decisions in isolation for centuries. Some of them were probably wrong. Now we have the chance to make better choices together. Zaraeth nodded slowly. I think I understand now. You're not our guardians anymore. You're our partners. We always hope to be, Jin replied. As the human delegation left the council chambers, the crystal dome continued its slow rotation among the stars. But something fundamental had changed. The galaxy was no longer a collection of species struggling alone against an uncaring universe. It was a community, protected not by hidden guardians, but by friends who had finally revealed themselves and asked to help openly. In the depths of space, automatic monitoring systems that had watched silently for 8 centuries began broadcasting new signals. Not watching anymore, but participating. For the first time in Earth's history,